This is the new Honor 7X, and on paper it's a bargain at just $200 or £270. But is it actually worth buying? Well, first impressions are really good, with an all-metal body, 6-inch screen with super thin bezels, dual camera lenses, and yes, even a headphone jack. All that for $200. But the reason it costs a little bit more here in the UK and in Europe is we get a slightly better spec with 4 gigs of RAM and 64 gigs of storage versus 3 and 32 on the US model, although all versions support micro SD cards, so you can expand the storage. If you haven't heard of them before, Honor is essentially a sub-brand of Huawei, offering more budget-friendly options like the 7X, as opposed to flagship phones like the Huawei P10 or the Mate 10 Pro. Here's one I made earlier. But while the 7X isn't as cheap as, say, the Moto G5, picking it up, the Honor looks and feels a lot more premium. I really like it in this Aurora blue color as well, and it looks a lot like the iPhone 7 Plus from the back, with the aluminium body, antenna lines, dual camera lenses, and also you get a fingerprint reader on the back, which is seriously fast. I think Honor say it's 0.25 seconds. It's basically instant. It's really good. And also the 7X supports dual SIM cards, which as I travel more, I'm finding more and more useful. You get a single speaker on the bottom, which is decent, but it sounds a bit tinny. So what is slightly surprising and a bit disappointing is the fact the 7X uses the older micro USB port rather than the USB-C, which most phones use these days, so it's not the most future-proof. I'm a big fan of taller 18:9 phone screens like this. I think they look a lot more modern, especially when you've got thinner bezels as well. The 7X's 5.93-inch Full HD screen uses an LCD panel rather than AMOLED, so it doesn't have the most vibrant colours or the deepest blacks, but it still looks good. And while there are phones out there with better displays, and side by side the £700 Mate 10 Pro does look a bit brighter and punchier, considering the 7X is a third the price, it's still very impressive. Now inside, under the hood, we've got one of Huawei's own Kirin 659 processors, along with 4 gigs of RAM, which in benchmarks doesn't come out all that well. It offers around half the performance of the Kirin 970 in the Mate 10 Pro. But despite that, the 7X still feels really fast. Whether you're swiping between screens, opening apps, it all feels really responsive. So performance is surprisingly good for a phone this cheap, although it is disappointing to see the 7X runs the older Android 7 and also the older EMUI 5.1 skin. The bigger annoyance for me is the ridiculous amount of bloatware pre-installed apps on the 7X. You can remove most of them and maybe install a third-party launcher like the Google or Nova launcher if you're not a fan of the EMUI look, but I wish they didn't fill it with so much crap. That's why I always prefer stock Android. But it's not a deal breaker. You can clean it up, and despite the bloatware, it still feels really responsive, and that's the important thing. Now, onto the camera. You don't get many budget phones with 2 lenses like this. We've got one 16 megapixel and one 2 megapixel. But this isn't a telephoto or a wide-angle lens. It's just for extra depth information, so the main camera can take better portrait and wide aperture shots. The camera ranges from super shallow f/0.95 aperture to f/16, where everything is pretty much in focus. The wide aperture mode can be quite good, producing some nice bokeh effect blurred backgrounds, but the portrait mode isn't quite so good and too smooth, and there's just not much detail there. And as you'd expect, quality drops in low light as well, with more noise, less detail, and because there's no OIS, it can be more blurry. Video is also limited to 1080p at 30 FPS, there's no 4K option here, and again without OIS, it can be very shaky. So it's a decent stills camera overall, but just make sure you've got good light for the best results. But what about battery life? Well, I can tell you right away that it doesn't quite match the Mate 10 Pro here with its mammoth 4000 mAh cell, but again, it is also 3 times the price, so that's not really a fair comparison. Inside the 7X, we've got a 3340 mAh cell, which is a good size, and combined with the more mid-range processor, and also the relatively lower Full HD resolution, as opposed to Quad HD, that all helps improve battery life. 1 hour of YouTube used 12% of the battery, and 1 hour of gaming used 20%. So with normal use, I get around 6 hours of screen on time, and by the end of a normal working day, by around 10 PM, I've got about 20% of the battery left. So it's fine, it will get you through a full day, but it's not the best on the market. For example, the cheaper Moto E4 Plus lasts a good few hours longer, and the obviously the Mate 10 Pro here lasts like a good half a day longer, but it's still fine, again, considering the price. But what is more frustrating, what is really frustrating, is the lack of any fast charging support. Most phones these days, I'm filming this in 2018, this came out just last month in December, most phones now support fast charging. It just takes ages to charge, a good 2.5 hours, which is really annoying, and for me, one of the bigger weaknesses of the 7X. But there are a few other areas where the 7X compromises to get its lower price. As I say, micro USB and also no fast charging, but it also doesn't support the latest Bluetooth 5 or Wi-Fi AC or even NFC, so you can't use contactless payments with it. But for me, none of that's really the end of the world, and while it's got an average camera and the software is a bit dated, not forgetting all that bloatware, I still really like the Honor 7X. It's lovely to use, feels fast, looks great, and again, for the price, $200 or £270, I think it's an absolute steal. It's great value for money. And while it may not be perfect and there is strong competition, I still highly recommend it. Click that like and subscribe button if you enjoyed this video. Let me know what you think of the Honor 7X in the comments and what you think is the best budget phone right now. Thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you guys next time right here on the Tech Chap.